So we're going to do this quickly. We're going to move on to 1-7 this period as well. So, first, sums. We have 3 rules here. We have 3 rules. If A and B are negative, then A plus B is also negative. You know this already, but think of numbers to make certain of this. And to figure out what the sum of 2 negative numbers is, you could add their positive values and just tack on a negative. So if I ask you to add -4 and -5, it's clearly -9. How do you do that? You do 4 plus 5, and then you just tack on a negative sign. Okay, so when we sum together negative numbers, just really add positives and make the answer negative. That's what the first rule is saying. And you've been doing this for years that you don't even realize you're doing it anymore. Most of you probably say, -3 and -5 is -8 because it makes sense. But it's really 5 plus 3 is 8, and then a negation of that. It's the same thing. If A is positive and B is negative, then absolute value of A is greater than the absolute value of B. Then it is positive. Now, let's go through this. So pick numbers that fall into this case. A is positive. Give me a number. 8. Give me a number for B that's negative, whose absolute value is less than 8. -4. 8 plus -4 is simply 4. It is positive. That's what the second rule says. And this is obvious. If the bigger of the 2 numbers is positive, the sum is positive. If the bigger of the 2 numbers is negative, the sum is negative. That's the third rule. Okay? So again, if I switched these signs and made it -8 and +4, the answer would be a -4 now. Again, it's all these rules are saying. Questions? Can I go to the next? Okay, please stop me if you have a question. I'm going to go fast with this just because of the fact that this is all review. This is very important, and a lot of people forget this rule or this definition, so please remember this. Subtraction is exactly defined as adding the opposite. That's all it is. Okay, it's all it is. So that's why when you learned, a lot of you learned this, 4 minus -2. What do your teachers always tell you? Minus negative means? Yeah, because look, again, all you're doing is really adding the opposite. So make this adding and make this the opposite. Didn't your teacher always say 2 negatives make a positive there? That's really the reason. Sure, you can think of this. George, you said this is really a -1 out in front. -1 times -2 is positive. That's another way to think about it, sure. But really, subtraction is really defined as adding the opposite of what you have. Okay, that's all that is. Subtraction is defined as adding the opposite. Next. Products. A lot of rules for products. Let's go through. I don't want to sit here and read them off. So read them off one at a time, and I'll stop after each one.
The product of 2 positive values or 2 negative values is positive.
We all know that one, right? Negative times negative is a positive. Positive times positive is a positive. Bridge, go.
The product of a positive and a negative value is always negative.
That's always the case. Always the case. Is that clear? If there's a negative and a positive. If there are 2 negatives and a positive, that's not the case. Because the 2 negatives make a positive, and a positive times a positive remains positive. Next.
The absolute value of the product of 2 or more numbers is the product of their absolute values.
Make sense of that. Think of numbers. To make it more difficult, think of a negative and a positive. If I had -3 times 4, and I want the absolute value, it's the same thing as doing this. All right, get the answer. What does this become? And what does this become? Both 12. Okay? Both 12. Ash? This is something that you've learned since you were in like 2nd grade. Anything times 0 is 0. Now, we use this, believe it or not, as one of our rules and reasonings to the reason why we can solve quadratics. When you solve quadratics, it's using the property of 0. It's saying that one of the factors could be 0, so you get x equals 2 and x equals 5 as your answers. Where does that come from? It comes from this. It's saying set one of the factors equal to 0 because the answer is 0. Or set the other factor equal to 0 because the answer is 0. That's what allows you to get 2 answers from a quadratic when you're solving an equation. Okay? Hannah?
Property of -1, a times -1 equals -a, where a is any real number.
Okay, this is kind of like the identity property, but it's the opposite of that in a sense, right? The identity property, we know, we talked about that already. A times 1 is A. A times -1 is just simply -a. Tristan, the last one, please.
The product of non-zero numbers is positive if the number of negative factors is even, and negative if the number of negative factors is odd.
So explain this one. This is the only one that's a little bit wordy. A little bit wordy. Who could explain this one here? Okay, good. You can use an example if you want.
So like, if there's an even number of negative numbers that don't say 2, then it's always positive, but there's a negative and a negative is positive.
Okay.
But if there's a negative number of
An odd number.
Oh, if there's an odd number of negative numbers, then it's positive, and then it's negative again because it's another negative.
Very good. Okay, that's all it's saying. So if you look at the number of negative numbers, and you see that the number of negative numbers is odd, as Kate mentioned, your answer will still be negative. But if the number of negative numbers is even, it will always be positive. So you can do this further and further and further. So, George, is this going to be a positive or negative answer?
Negative.
Why?
Because there's 5 negative.
Yeah, it's -3, -3, -3, -3, -3, 5 of them multiplying, thus a negative answer. I didn't care what the answer was, I just want to know if it was negative or positive. Okay? So a simple SAT kind of question could be something like this. They'd try to make it confusing and say, the following expression is blank, and your choices would be positive, negative, 0, not possible to be determined or something. But this would be, to me, an easy question because all you have to look at is what? The exponent. Even exponent means that this is going to be multiplied an even amount of times. When you multiply something an even amount of times, you get a positive answer. So this will be a positive answer. This will give you a negative answer. Questions? No? Okay. All right, quotients. Quotients. Annette, first one, please. Read nice and loud.
Quotients. The quotient of... Division is defined as multiplication by the reciprocal. Note that since 0 has no reciprocal, division by 0 is not defined.
Have you ever heard that before? You can't divide by 0? It's undefined. You hear in math class? This is the reason why right here. It's because of the definition of division. Division, if I said I want to take 2/3, this is the easy way to put it because everybody remembers this, and divide it by 1/2. 1/2. I can't do that. So what do? I multiply by?
2 over 1.
Good. I multiply by the reciprocal. Well, suddenly I have 2/3 divided by 0. What's the reciprocal of 0? What's the reciprocal of 0? There is none. Because it becomes 1 over 0 here. And if you think about it for a second, it's impossible because if I had 2/3 divided by 0, how can I divide a number by 0? Here's the easy way to think about it. And we talk about it as undefined, but I'm going to give you a quick preview of pre-calculus. Imagine you have a box. And in that box, there are 50 baseballs. 50 baseballs, all right? And I have a machine that can take 10 baseballs out at a time. There's 50 in here, it can take 10 out at a time. How many times do I have to do it? 5 times. Pretty easy, right? Agreed? Okay. Now I've got a machine that can take out 5 baseballs at a time. How many times does it take to do it? 10. Now I've got a machine, there's 50 balls here still. I've got a machine that can take out 2 at a time. 2, 2, 2, 2. How many times?
25.
So what's happening to your answer? You guys are giving me an answer. What's happening to it?
Increasing.
It's increasing, right? Now I have a machine that only can take 1 baseball at a time. How many times does it take? It keeps getting larger, doesn't it? Now the next machine, suddenly the arm broke. How long is it going to take to do this?
Forever.
Forever. Or louder? Infinite. So technically, you're going to hear in calculus about the concept that when you divide by 0, the answer is actually infinity. And we're going to talk more about that this year. It's called a limit, really. It's not really an answer. It's called a limit. But the reason when you divide by 0, you say it's undefined, is because technically it's infinite. You could divide by 0 all day long and never get to the answer, or never get the solution. Okay, so that's really where it's coming from. The second one, Kate, the second bullet point.
The quotient of two positive values or two negative values is positive.
The exact same rule as multiplication. Mr. Brown, third one.
The third one.
Yep.
The quotient of a positive and negative value is negative.
Again, the same rule as multiplication, no different. And finally, the last one, back to Max.
Division of a polynomial by a monomial.
Okay, so let's talk about this one for a sec. This is one that seems to, I don't know why, put students for a bit of throws you for a loop here. When you divide by a monomial, you have to divide into every single term of the numerator. And this is going to come up later in the year, and I've seen this on every SAT. I've seen this kind of a problem. Where they think that this can cancel with this, and that's your answer. That is absolutely not true. This is not true by any means. You cannot divide a monomial into only one term of the polynomial numerator. Mono means, so one term. Poly means multiple, many. Polynomial has multiple terms. A monomial has one term. The monomial has to divide into everything. So if I were to really do this in a reasonable way, this would become that's a minus. That's a minus. Why does it erase so much when I do that? I gotta change the size of the eraser thing, right? Notability, though, it links things together by what you touch. So sometimes that helps. This app, it's a little bit different. So that's really what you have to do. And then, obviously, what does x squared over x squared become? 1. And that's all you could do. I mean, you could simplify further, obviously. This x cancels with the squared term, so this just becomes 2 over x, and then this is negative 7 over x squared. This rule, although it seems very simple, is extremely important that you understand that the denominator can never just cancel with one thing. Okay, it's going to apply with factoring as well. Questions on this? Okay. Homework looks like a lot. It's not, trust me. All the rules we just did, how simple were those rules? That's how simple this homework is going to be. So even though it says 16 to 40 multiples of 4, 10 to 35 multiples, it looks like a lot. It's not. It's going to take you 2 seconds to fly through this. Okay, so make sure you work on this homework tonight. Questions? 1-7. We're driving on to the next thing.